Hello, everyone, and welcome to another edition of Space Warfighter Talks. I'm your host, Bill Wolf, the president and founder of the Space Force Association. We are honored to talk to Dr. Emily Bohner, program manager for Dragon Army, who works at the Air Force Research Lab. Hello, Dr. Bohner. Thanks so much for taking time out of your busy schedule to be with and talk to the Space Force Association today.
Thank you. It's an honor to be here. You've had some pretty high-profile interviewees, so I'm a little intimidated. I got to be honest. I'm in some company of the greats here.
Well, I tell you, it's really about exposing the discussion that folks are having around the space superiority mission. And yes, you're right. We have talked to and spoken with leaders in the Space Force, but really it's about trying to figure out what's happening in the trenches. What are people actually doing to help solve the space superiority mission? And I tell you, the work you're doing over there at Dragon Army is phenomenal. And I really want to get that out to folks so that they can understand all the good work that you're doing. So before we get too far into it, and for folks who don't know what AFRL is, would you mind providing a quick background in how you ended up at the Air Force Research Lab?
That could be a very long story. I'll try to abbreviate it. So I've actually been working with the research lab for a little over a decade now. I started actually as a National Research Council postdoctoral associate, and then I moved into the civil servant side. And I have been working in space situational awareness since about 2011. I joined the Space Situational Awareness Integration Group, and I've been pretty much in that realm ever since. Space domain awareness now is the new buzz term, but I've been in that realm ever since as part of the Air Force Research Lab.
Thank you, ma'am. Appreciate that. And then for folks who don't understand, how did Dragon Army form? I mean, what is Dragon Army, and how did you become the program manager of that organization?
Yeah, so there's multiple things that came into play in creating what is now Dragon Army operations. We'll call it Dragon Ops or Dragon Army or Dragon Army Ops. But the primary one being, I had worked on a previous program where our software developers, our integrators, people that were developing tools for the warfighter did not have access to an operational environment where they could test and get feedback on their applications and on the work that they were doing. They couldn't subject it to any realistic scenarios. And then in terms of feedback sessions, I was lucky to get a sit down with some operators for each of my teams. We were trying to onboard about 14 at the time, different teams, different development teams. And I was lucky to get each development team maybe 2 feedback sessions in a year. And I said, this is not going to work if we want to actually do rapid innovation. And if we want to walk into solutions, we need to have feedback on a much, much higher cadence and a much, much faster cadence. And so we said, well, our operators are very busy. Our crews are very busy. We don't want to take them away from their jobs. But what if we could create an environment that was operational like, and we had pseudo operators that were attempting to do the same types of tasks that our operators are typically doing. And so that was the birth of the idea of Dragon Army operations, to create that environment where we could subject our new applications, new developments to operational scenarios, and get real data on the performance, and also get feedback, human and operational level feedback on the performance of those technologies in those scenarios.
Thank you for that overview. I don't know if people really understand the importance of testing. And to your point, yeah, you've got to get real-time feedback on a much more frequent basis so that you can continue to innovate and provide those capabilities back to the warfighter. The fact is, the Space Force is relatively small, and not all, operators are busy, to your point, doing their job. And so it requires an augmentation unit to help provide and tease out some of those key processes and develop those capabilities so that they can use those in the future. So tell us a little bit about, now that you talked a little bit about the process, let's talk a little bit about the actual product and the SACT event. What does that stand for, and how did that evolve?
So, so the SACT and Dragon Army evolved right around the same time, and it became our primary mechanism of bringing in commercial technologies and getting feedback on those commercial technologies. We had this idea of we need to expose all of these new technologies to operational scenarios, and on the flip side, the SACT was saying we need to have an experimental venue where we can bring in these new technologies, and it was a perfect marriage. And so when it came time to, when the rubber hit the road, it really was about bringing the commercial technologies into this environment where we could exercise those technologies right alongside of a DoD exercise. And so the SACT is broader than just the commercial cell. The unexpected result was that the SACT commercial cell became the biggest component of the SACT, because we had so much interest and we had so much innovative technologies and new things that we needed to bring in. So what we had set out to do with the SACT is to create a very low barrier of entry to our commercial participants, and to bring them in to play all collaboratively together. Rather than saying, okay, show me what you have, okay, show me what you have, one by one. Instead, we bring everybody together and we say, okay, these are all the technologies we have, these are all the products we have. We actually have a lot of vendors that are using other vendors' products to create derivative products. And so it becomes a very collaborative atmosphere. Also, in between the SACTs, we are running what we call Dragon Army Ops Days, which is a biweekly cadence. And the reason we wanted to improve and increase the cadence so significantly is we wanted to have an opportunity for these innovators to have feedback, not only 3 times a year, which is about what our SACT runs, is about 3 times a year, but we wanted to actually have that feedback in the middle of our development cycles. Most development sprints are weeks long, a couple weeks. Ours with our internal team is 2 weeks long. And so with the Dragon Army Ops Days, we wanted to have that feedback immediately. Once you created a feature, you deployed it into operations, you could get feedback on that immediately. That would be feedback that could run right into your next development sprint. So we're pretty busy. We're running these about every 2 weeks. We're starting them up again. We usually take a small break after the SACT, and we're starting them up again. Just this sprint, we just kicked off our first sprint of the next SACT cycle.
You just covered a lot of ground there. That's a lot to unpack. So let's first start by clarifying, what does SACT stand for? Sprint Advanced Concept Trainer. Is that right? Did I get that right?
Sprint Advanced Concepts Training, absolutely.
Concepts training. Okay, thank you. And from that standpoint, when you say sprint, that means quickly. Advanced means it's advanced training beyond initial qualification training. I mean, it's really getting into some of the vignettes and mission sets that the operators really are kind of exploring in terms of how they support their space superiority mission. But I think we can delve a little bit deeper into specific mission sets. Let's talk about space domain awareness and the importance of that mission set to space superiority, and how space domain awareness is being played in the SACT events.
Oh, that is a huge, deep, deep rabbit hole we could go down. But at the highest level, really, there has been such a growth of commercial technologies in the commercial space arena to serve a lot of these new entrants to the commercial space realm. And I'm sure we could, list the huge long list of participants here. But to serve these new satellite owners and operators and whatnot, there's also been a huge growth of space domain awareness commercial providers that provide tracking and satellite support and space domain awareness support to these commercial entities. So that is really what we are bringing together within the SACT, is the space domain awareness and the commercial components of that, and how that together can augment the DoD mission. there's been an effort for a while, and if you've been tracking a lot of the news on space and Department of Commerce and that whole transition, the real goal is to get this to be a collaborative space traffic management entity that then provides that that commercial and civil component to space, just like we have in air traffic management. So things don't go from nothing to a military engagement. There's this whole civil component. And so that's really where we're standing. We're standing in that gap right now between the military and the civil component, saying, okay, there's all these commercial entities that can help support this, and bringing them all together. We're definitely working with Department of Commerce as well. They co-sponsor the SACT commercial cell. And so we're providing that bridge right now. Eventually, a lot of that space traffic management side is going to go over to Department of Commerce, and then the DoD deals with the actual protect and defend side, and then that civil component goes over to the Department of Commerce. And right now, we're just standing in that gap, trying to help facilitate this to actually happen.
Thank you. Is it analogous? Because people obviously understand Federal Aviation Administration, and they'll say, well, is it like FAA? And then at some point, if there's a problem that's presented, then FAA kind of turns to the government, the DoD, and says, hey, there's an issue. We're going to turn this responsibility over to the DoD. Is it similar when you're talking about that? Is that kind of similar, or did I get that wrong?
I don't want to speculate too much on what the final end state is going to be, but that would be my interpretation. Is we want to have the civil space traffic management elevate if necessary, if and when necessary, and only when necessary. And so the DoD shouldn't be concerning themselves with civil on civil, close approaches, those kinds of things, and only dealing with things that might be nefarious, things that might be, severe anomalies, or things that would concern the military satellites themselves.
Thank you. It's probably hard to quantify how effective and how much you're augmenting DoD capabilities, because the space fence has been around forever. Can you speculate a little bit on how you're increasing percentage-wise the current DoD infrastructure, and how commercial is coming to the table to help augment the space domain awareness mission?
I don't want to speculate too far, but I will say that the quickness in how fast this stood up, and how quickly our leadership wanted to move into an operational capability, I would say that we're definitely helping. And like I said, I don't want to speculate too far, but I would say that that request came from somewhere. And I think it's a testimony to how fast the commercial entities are innovating, and how responsive they are to any kind of tasking and requests that the DoD is supplying. And so I would say that that the request itself tells me that we're definitely doing a lot to help, and potentially also alleviating some of the burden and some of the workload that would historically be taking place on the DoD side.
And you referred to this organization during the SACT events as a commercial integration cell. Is that correct?
Actually, what we just stood up is called the JTFSD Commercial Operations Cell. So we, in short, call it JCO. There's actually a commercial integration cell that's part of CSPOC. That is the go-between between CSPOC and their commercial entities that they're partnering with. So make sure that we don't confuse those two. So the JCO was stood up really to augment the protect and defend mission. I think that what we're doing, though, in the tech baseline, what we're doing is definitely going to be also serving the Department of Commerce and Space Traffic Management side as well. But it just so happened that the Protect and Defend was the first to jump and say, hey, I need part of that tech baseline to be serving my needs.
And so you just said JTFSD. Joint Task Force Space Defense underneath U.S. Spacecom J3, correct?
Yes.
So your primary customer right now is the Combatant Command, U.S. Space Command.
Yeah, so we're working directly with a very small cell of government government operators, and we serve them directly. So everything in that tech baseline, we develop directly for their use. We also are procuring services that are, not saying, hey, I'm going to buy your software. I'm just going to buy your person, and your person's going to tell me what to do and going to tell me what they're seeing and do the analytics on the commercial side, and then you just tell me the answer. And so we have this small cadre right now. It's only 3 deep of government personnel that are coordinating with all of our commercial personnel that are running daytime operations.
Let's talk about agility, because you said that's one of the missions is getting capability to the warfighter as quickly as possible. So can you say typically acquisition processes take X amount of time, and what you've been able to demonstrate during your SACT events is you've been able to tease out capabilities and present those to the warfighters in this amount of time? Can you talk about that timeline just a little bit?
Yeah, I would say that historically, just the validation and verification process and operational acceptance, I've seen that take, even in rapid development programs, I've seen that take years in terms of testing, validation, getting trained, and getting operational acceptance. I would say 2 years plus. Our first tech baseline we got from literally first line of code to in operations in under a year. So that was a huge. Nobody even on the program expected that for it to move that fast. But really, our goal, our bar, which maybe we need to raise a little bit, but our bar going in was we want things to go from concept to operations in 18 to 24 months. We want somebody to come in and say, I have a great idea. I think this is the greatest thing. This is going to solve all your problems. And we want to say, okay, bring it in. And we want to be able to have that in the operator's hands inside of 18 to 24 months. We might need to raise that now since we did it in 12.
Yeah, that's right. You set the standard and then you just blew right by the standard. And so now you need to, yeah.
Granted, I would say that some of that was lower hanging fruit. So maybe the higher hanging fruit, the 18 to 24 months is still good.
Well, that's a great news story. And I'm sure people are really excited about it. You bring up the point about how people can quickly bring capability to this event. Tell me a little bit about the process. How do people get onboarded to this event? If I'm a commercial company and I want to be part of this, which I suspect after having this discussion, you're going to have a lot of people probably trying to call you to say, hey, how do I get involved? So how do people get involved?
We're trying to automate some of that now with the registration process that's days from being live. So hopefully you'll be able to distribute that as that comes live. Right now, it's a very human intensive process. It's grown a lot faster than anyone expected. And so really, I would say, contact me and we'll forward you to the appropriate people. And like I said, we're really close to having our registration process rolled out live. And so then our participants can register on our site and get automatically included on our distribution lists and become part of the community. That being said, in terms of actual integration, we do have some onboarding that we need to do with companies to bring them in. One of our primary backbone capabilities is a unified data library. And so we have our participants, if they're not already on the unified data library with an account, we get them accounts. We have groups that we manage to be able to do data distribution and to be able to supply our operational scenarios. We do live scenarios, but we also do simulation scenarios. And so there is some onboarding. We try to keep that barrier to entry, though, as low as possible when it comes to integration. But when they are integrated, they're getting real data. They're getting real data. They're getting our simulation events that we layer over the real data. We've done a lot of really fun simulations. We can make it a really bad day in space when we want to. But with that, it's not, okay, yeah, you're part of our group, come in and talk and give us some PowerPoint. It's like, no, you're part of the crew. You come in, you sit on the crew, you get the data, you do what you can with it, you exchange products, you're giving your results to operators for their for their consolidation with all the rest of the products they're getting, or you're giving your products to other participants that then can create derivative products. And so literally when you're coming into our environment, you're becoming part of a crew. You're not coming in to talk and give presentations. You're really joining in and taking on real life scenarios and providing your own analysis to those scenarios.
Well, I tell you, I've been on crew before, and one of the worst things about being on crew is working shift work, where you've got 8 hours and you've got to work. The mid shift was the worst, where you just got to work from 8 at night until 6 in the morning. How do you prevent that from happening? And how do you work with our international partners?
Right into it, walked right into the solution. We actually have been working with our international partners for, when did we do the first? I think it was 19.3 that we did our first shift exchange with our international partners. So we do what's called a follow the sun shift change, where we each take an 8-hour shift around the globe. And so we have a Meridian cell, and we have a Pacific cell, and then an America cell, and we do handoffs, daytime handoffs. So everybody has daytime operations for 8 hours, quick handoff, and then the next cell takes the ball. We've been doing that then for, I think, 5 SACTs. We've done it now with a lot of success, actually. And so the hope is that, we've been the leader in standing up the JCO for regular daytime operations. The hope would be that our international partners would do the same, and everybody has regular, round the clock, 24/7 coverage after that we can hand off with our international partners.
Thank you. Just to follow on to that, could you describe where they're at, the locations of those international partners in those different cells?
We're actually, we had physical locations, but since COVID, we've gone full remote. And so even those cells are not, I would say that there's a nucleus for each one in terms of, we ran out of, and I'm going to botch the name and pronunciation, but Colombes, France, and Canberra, Australia would be the nucleus of those. But in terms of an actual physical presence, it's global and it's full remote. And so our SACT in April of last year was the first time we did full 100% remote. And it actually surprised everybody how well we did. And we've been pretty much full remote since. We haven't had a specific physical presence. Like I said, we do have a nucleus here at Catalyst Campus, and then same with our French and Australian cells. But for the most part, we've got people joining from all over in all of those regions.
Thank you. I got to circle back a little bit to the modeling and sim capability that you're creating with the data. I was able to interview Colonel Epstein, who's a commander at Air Force Agency for Modeling and Sim, a few weeks ago, and he was talking about the requirement for data and how important that is to create a realistic environment. And then let's talk a little bit as well about the requirement for folks to integrate the unified data library. What is the unified data library? And from what I understand, I think General Raymond has said that is going to be the backbone of SDA data. And if you want to participate in Space Force events, you're probably going to have to start integrating and figuring out how to integrate the UDL.
Yeah, I would, for specific presentation on Unified Data Library. I would definitely defer those questions to somebody else, but I would say that it's been a key enabler for us, especially in pulling in all of our commercial data and connecting with our participants with the simulation data. So the Unified Data Library has specific tags for exercise and simulation data. And so we have a cadre of mod sim providers. So not even, that's not even one sole system, but we have a number of mod sim providers that we task for simulating portions of these events. They then would generate truth data. That truth data goes into the Unified Data Library. And then we have other simulation tools that can pull that truth data and generate other observables based on that truth data. And so in space, we're really lucky when it comes to that kind of coordination, because almost everything and almost every capability that we work with is observations based. And so if we can generate obs for that scenario, we have the majority of the observables that we need in order to simulate an event. And so what we do is we work with our mod sim providers. We use the Unified Data Library to house all of our mod sim data. And then we have, we call it Trogdor, and anybody from the early 2000s viral videos will know what that's about. If not, waste a few minutes and YouTube it, but it's even pre-YouTube. But we call it Trogdor, and it's our data gateway. When people connect to Trogdor, it's basically meant to emulate what the Unified Data Library looks like, and it's just a different endpoint. And so in terms of integration, if they're integrated with the Unified Data Library, they automatically can connect to Trogdor and use that. And what Trogdor does is it reconciles live and simulation data. So if we move a satellite in simulation world, the live data is still going to come in saying, hey, that satellite's still right there. And so that's going to throw our exercise off. However, because we have Trogdor in the middle, it says, okay, I know this is part of the simulation. We're going to suppress this. We're going to pass the simulation data through so that everybody that is getting the data sees that object move from its actual position. And so in that way, and then we re-tag it as all exercise so we can hide it all so people can't cheat the system and just look for simulation data. But with that, then we can layer that simulation data in over the live data, and there's no integration barrier for people to get that data. It's the exact same endpoint, or it's different endpoint, exact same service, REST service calls, exact same integration. So if they can get Unified Data Library, they can connect to our data gateway.
What a phenomenal capability. And you started to talk a little bit about a specific example or vignette or scenario that you're working on. Can you go into a specific scenario? I mean, there's a lot of opinion about the types of scenarios that you're focusing on, but one is, how do you maintain custody of a specific object? And then what if you lose custody? How do you gain custody back? And then obviously close proximity operations is a very important discussion point. So could you talk just a little bit about the vignettes that you're helping to test out and tease out?
We have done a number of vignettes now in our mod sim capability. We're starting, actually I shouldn't even say starting, we're still about 6 months in now already of starting to chain these scenarios together. So we have done launches, we've done orbit insertions, we've done geotransfer orbits, we've done rendezvous proximity operations, we've done breakups, collisions, and so we've done a lot of things that you wouldn't want to do live. That's what we focused our efforts on. There's a lot of things that we can do live, but there are certain things that we definitely don't want to do live for safety reasons and being a good space custodian. And so especially when it comes to the breakups, collisions, or what could be considered risky RPO maneuvers, we do those in simulation. And so I alluded earlier, we can make it a pretty bad day in space. And we've done that. We've also done large scale debris fields. and working those scenarios. Our last SACT in November, we did a large scale breakup. We also chained together a launch event that that then went into geotransfer orbit, that then dropped off a daughter sat, and then had two satellites that were in opposing drift orbits. And so we've done complex scenarios like that to see how well the tools can keep up, to see how well we can track these things in real time. How soon do we know that these events are unfolding? How soon do we make assessments on what they're actually doing? And so we use those simulation events to do things like that, where we can control those events. We know what truth is, and so then we can see how well the crews are performing against that.
And when you say tools, you're talking about an application, the coding that creates an application. Is that correct?
Yep, absolutely.
Okay. And it could be as simple as an Excel spreadsheet, because you're in there just receiving data and doing REST service calls that can be kind of plugged into that Excel spreadsheet to give you data back as quickly as possible based on the operator needs.
Absolutely. We have a large range of tools, ranging from analyst tools that are looking at specific orbits or looking at specific maneuvers that we are trying to reconcile, to, I think I would characterize them as machine learning tools that look for pattern of life, look for deviations from pattern of life, and or are looking for conjunctions, looking for close approaches, and then we also have a whole cell that we call the PSRA cell, which is looking at open source information. What information can I find to build context around the scenario that is unfolding? There's a lot that happens in the Twitters and the open source community that provides a lot of good context for events, especially for our live events. When it comes to simulation, we are also looking at creating that context and that type of data to layer in with our simulation data. But so we have a lot of different tools that do a lot of those different things. They either mine for information, they look for those types of anomalies, or they're specific analyst tools, orbital analyst tools that we're looking for. Okay, what's the next pass? Who's going to be able to see this next? Those types of things that we're doing in terms of maintaining custody on specific objects, for example. And so that's a pretty broad range of tools that we're using when it comes to covering this whole space domain awareness mission area.
Oh, that is, again, it's such a phenomenal capability, and I really appreciate you getting into the specifics. We got some questions from the audience, if you don't mind. I've got one question. A person's asking, how does your effort work with ComSpock, as you seem to be describing similar commercial SDA and space traffic management goals? Is there a relationship between Dragon Army Ops, SACT events, and ComSpock?
You're talking about AGI ComSpock?
I would assume so. There's not much additional information there, but whatever the commercial SPOC is, if there's a commercial space operations center.
So they come and play with us. So
okay.
They're a participant in our SACT events, and they come to our ops days as well. And so they're participating with us in terms of their goals and our goals since the JCO stood up as a protect and defend entity and a government entity. There's a slight deviation there in our daytime work and operations, but in terms of our exercise operations, they come and play with us.
That's great news. I tell you, there's enough work for everybody, isn't there? And there's so much that has to get done. So I think the more folks that start to cover down on this mission set and describe the collaboration opportunities, I think it's going to be just continue to evolve, obviously. I've got another question here from a coworker of yours out at AFRL RV on the SSPIDR, and they're looking to support A5, I'm assuming Space Force A5, or maybe Air Force A5, on wargaming at multiple levels, recently developed the GOTS tool for MLDLW. It's physics-based, model-based, or MBE-based, and we're looking for integration with M&S and products to model wargaming accurately. Who would you recommend they speak with to integrate with the SACT events?
If it's M&S related in terms of creating those scenarios, we're divided into cells. We're actually named them after the historical wargaming terminology. And so we have what we call our white cell, and that is responsible for all of the ModSim integration and the build out of the ModSim tools. And so if it's creating scenarios, that is the absolute integration point, is the white cell. We also have what we call the blue cell, which is creating tools for our management layer and our friendly operators. We don't yet have a red cell. We'd actually like to get advocacy for standing that up and resources for standing that up. Because I think that was one of our primary goals when we set out on this mission, was to actually have a red cell to play scenarios out against. And so we have the red, white, and blue cells basically in accordance with what would be generally wargaming terminology. I would say the white cell is, when it comes to ModSim scenarios, that is the primary integration point.
And it sounds like really what folks are going to be waiting for is additional information from you. So when that site goes live, for folks to start integrating with the SACT events and Dragon Army Ops, we'll make sure that we help get the word out for you. I mean, I know you're going to publish it there. And so if you send us the information, we'll send that out to our membership base and post it across social media, so folks can start to understand exactly what you're doing and start to participate in these extremely important events, especially as we're talking about one of the most critical missions in U.S. Spacecom, which is space domain awareness, and then obviously supporting the protecting and defending mission as well. So we will stand by for additional information on that. It's some phenomenal work you're doing over there, Dr. Bohner. I can't tell you how much I appreciate you taking time today to talk about all the good work. And I'd like to have a follow-on discussion to talk about how you're actually, what's the product of the events? Where do the products go? So you're done with an event and you probably outbrief or come up with a report, and that goes to somebody, and then that turns into basically a persistent capability. How does that process work?
So we're building that plane as we're flying it, but I would say the first I guess group of technologies that came in and operationalized as our initial tech baseline is not meant to be the final solution. It's meant to be a jumping off point to say, okay, this is what we have right now. But what we've done is we have also made huge strides in supporting the pipeline to bring those capabilities in and bringing new capabilities in. So every SACT and we're working it out of what that operational acceptance looks like. But what we'd like to have happen is that every SACT, we have new capabilities that come, and things that meet certain performance and show that kind of promise. We would say, hey, let's get that on a path, get it into the tech baseline. And what we'd like to have happen is that every event, we roll things over into our tech baseline as those capabilities mature and as those capabilities show the results that we need to have and show improvement over the baseline that we currently have. And so we'd actually like to get to a point where we're doing relatively short duration contracts for these types of capabilities. When I'm saying short duration, I'm saying like 6 months to a year-ish type contracts. So that leaves a room for new entrants to come in and improve upon the tech baseline that we have. I would like to get to a point where we're doing continuous operational acceptance. So you hear the DevOps community saying continuous integration, continuous deployment, and DevOps and DevSecOps would be continuous security. What we're doing is we're coining a term, Dev DT OT OA Ops, which is basically saying we're going to do continuous operational tests, continuous operational validation, and continuous operational acceptance. And we want to have that rolling in even as we procure the next set of capabilities that come into the tech baseline. It's not snap a chalk line and that's where we're at. It's, okay, how do we improve upon that? We're expecting our commercial entrants to be improving upon those technologies continuously, and at every ops day would be the ideal, and rolling new capability into that baseline.
Thank you. Now, you said that your main customer is JTF-SD under US Spacecom. Is there an opportunity, in your opinion, to work with the service component as well, and what SMC is doing with regard to some of this capability development, or is that something you've explored or looked at?
To be quite honest, I don't want to speculate too far on that. But I will say that under our new Space Camp charter, we are serving directly the Space Force Delta units. So the JCO aside, we've got a number of capabilities that are being served by Space Camp. And with that, we would like to have this type of process be involved in terms of operational test, operational validation of all of these capabilities, even beyond the space domain awareness mission area. So in all mission areas associated with the Space Force, we would like to have this ability to do the DT, OT, and OA on a rolling basis. And so that then can serve all of the acquisitions components in terms of their capabilities coming in and being able to be validated quickly and into operations and in the hands of the operational users.
That's great news. And I suspect when Space Training and Readiness Command, STARCOM, stands up, they're going to be on your front door trying to figure out how do they get involved and how can you help them develop these capabilities much faster. So what a great news story. I really do, again, appreciate you taking time out of your busy schedule to talk with SFA and our members today. Is there any closing comments you'd like to have just to make sure that the audience leaves with the key problem sets that you're focusing on and how you're going to continue to tackle the difficult problems associated with space superiority?
I would say, I think the drum that I've been beating on, and eventually I think it'll catch on, but the drum I've really been beating on is it's not about the shiny rocks. It's not about a specific capability, but it's really about refining our pipeline and our ability to procure technology faster and get it through our pipeline faster. I think that is what has historically plagued the DoD. Is the long lead times for getting something from I have a good idea into operations. And the real goal here is to smooth out that pipeline and work with all of the parts and pieces that need to be involved in order to get things into the hands of operators when it comes to training, when it comes to testing, when it comes to validation, of working with that, not against it, to smooth out this pipeline so we can get capability into hands of operators. I think especially when it comes to the software world, it turns on its head twice in a year. The capabilities are being developed so fast that if we want to be fighting with today's technology, we have to have a pipeline that can bring these things in and integrate them very, very quickly. We've historically done a lot of top-down and a lot of arduous processes to make sure that these meet certain thresholds, meet certain standards. And what we need to do is we need to borrow what the software community has done in terms of DevOps in the automation and the automate the validation, automate the deployment, automate the security, so that we can bring these things in a timely fashion, and we can always be fighting with today's technology and not technology that's 5+ years old. A computer that's 5+ years old is pretty much a dinosaur. So we don't want to be in that scenario. So if I can emphasize anything, it's the pipeline, not the capability, not the great idea, not the specific widget that we're developing, but it's really about smoothing out that pipeline so that we can get those technologies in the hands of operators.
Ma'am, truer words cannot be spoken. New standard is 12 months. So getting capabilities to warfighters in under 12 months, I think that's a great standard. I know that's not the standard, but I mean, obviously some good and great goals to work towards.
And
Ma'am, thank
I
you.
do also want to put a shout out, because that wasn't all us, that 12 months. We're on the shoulders of giants. We're on the shoulders of the Space Camp giants, the Platform One giants, the Unified Data Library giants. There's a lot of enabling technologies that have gotten us to where we're at, that we would not be near as far down this path if we didn't have those. So I need to put a shout out and say, really, we're standing on shoulders of giants. We didn't do this from scratch.
Yes, ma'am. It's really about creating the opportunity and letting the experts come around a problem set, passionate about the mission, wanting to get the problem solved, and then solving the problem. And I mean, what a great platform that you've created over there. As you get more information, please send it our way, and we'll make sure we get that out to our members and our followers. Ma'am, thank you. I can't thank you enough again for taking time out of your busy schedule to talk with us today. And we look forward to the continued success of Dragon Army Ops and the SACT events. Ma'am, thank you, and have a great day.
Thank you. It's an absolute honor to be here. Thank you for having me.
You bet. Talk soon. Have a good one. Bye now.